What's good, guys? Welcome back to the first take, and as promised, it's time to continue our Game of Thrones, the Complete Histories and Lore. This is part 3. This is the first part of season 2, but we'll just count it as each part that I put up, so part 3 technically. Let's get into this. Looking forward to this.
Dark wings, dark words. I was only a boy when the Raven came to call my father, Lord Eddard Stark, to another war. Balon Greyjoy had raised the Iron Islands in revolt and burned the Lannister fleet at anchor. King Robert Baratheon again needed his old friend. My mother Catelyn was not happy to lose her lord husband to Robert again. 6 years before, he had left her to avenge his father and brother against the Mad King. But now he had sons and daughters of his own, and, unspoken, another son who wasn't hers from the last time he went to war. My brother, Jon Snow. But she knew that in marrying my father, she had married the North. We hold our honor and duty as dear as our own gods. When the time came, my father marched south to restore peace and order to the realm. My father always told me the Iron Islands were a strange and dangerous place. Its people, the Ironborn, keep neither the old gods nor the Seven, and despise all honest toil. Their ancestors ravaged the western shores, raping and slaving and putting it to the torch, and their songs still ring through the halls of the Ironborn, while everywhere else they are whispered to wayward children at bedtime.
Vikings.
Perhaps Lord Balon thought Westeros had not healed from the war against the Mad King, and was as fragmented and suspicious as the ancient kingdoms his forebears had terrorized. Robert's navy corrected him at Fair Isle when they smashed the proud Iron Fleet. Robert and my father corrected him at Pike, his own castle, when they pulled down his towers and breached his walls. My father never liked to speak of his battles, but from other men I learned what transpired. Thoros of Myr was first through the breach with his flaming sword. Not far behind him was Jorah Mormont of Bear Island, my father's bannerman who earned the knighthood he would later shame, and lords from every corner of the Seven Kingdoms. All day, through every passage in the castle, they fought side by side. My father with our ancestral sword Ice, and King Robert with his warhammer against a horde of axe-wielding Ironborn. In the end, Lord Balon bent the knee. King Robert generously allowed Lord Balon to retain his title and castle. The price of peace was custom. The only son of Balon's to survive his foolish rebellion would be taken as a hostage against future treasons. My father even volunteered to foster the boy himself, I suspect, to make Theon Greyjoy a different man than his father, who would bring honor and duty to the Iron Islands when he returned as heir. So my mother's silent fear came true, and my father returned with another child. Theon ate with us, played with us, and fought with us. Once the great bond between my father and Robert Baratheon united the realm against the Mad King and brought him to justice for his crimes. Now, another monster sits on the Iron Throne, and another debt of blood has owed my family. Theon is my murdered father's ward. I am my murdered father's son. Like my father and Robert, bound in blood, if not by blood, we are brothers.
Nope. Fucked you over, didn't he?
When Aegon and his dragons burned Harren the Black and all his sons at Harrenhal, the days when men feared the sight of our longships were over. Aegon would not permit marauders and raiders in his Seven Kingdoms. With Harren died our empire, and the old way that forged it. But what is dead may never die. 6 years after Robert Baratheon won his crown, my father, Balon Greyjoy, sought to restore our ancient rights. He declared the Iron Islands independent, and himself its king, and sent the Iron Fleet in a daring raid on Lannisport where they burned the Lannister ships at anchor, making us unchallenged in the Sunset Sea. This was the seed of our undoing. My eldest brother Roderick led a frontal assault on Seaguard, a town built to protect the mainland from us. After ferocious fighting beneath the city walls, he was slain by Lord Jason Mallister and his men defeated. By this time, Stannis Baratheon had brought Robert's fleet around Westeros, and somehow managed to trap the Iron Fleet at Fair Isle, smashing it. Robert's victory was now all but assured, yet we made him bleed for each island. Stannis Baratheon captured Great Wick, the largest of the Iron Islands, and Sir Barristan Selmy himself subdued Old Wick. Robert and Lord Eddard Stark led the main assault against the island of Pike. They razed the town of Lordsport to the ground before Robert turned his full fury on our family's stronghold. When they breached the walls, the first through was Thoros of Myr with his ridiculous flaming sword, followed by every minor lord of Westeros hungry for glory.
I need to see more of that guy.
My other brother Maron was killed when the siege engines brought down a tower on his head. I was now my father's only living son, and heir to the Iron Islands.
Not quite.
When my father saw his cause was lost, he wisely conceded defeat to Robert, who otherwise would have pulled down our castle stone by stone with us in it. As my father said to me then, no man has ever died from bending his knee. He who kneels may rise again, blade in hand. He who will not kneel stays dead, stiff legs and all. As it stands, Robert allowed my father to keep his lands and title as Lord of the Iron Islands, King of Salt and Rock, Son of the Sea Wind, Lord Reaper of Pike, for a price. His last son and heir shipped off to Winterfell as an honoured guest. I would eat at the Stark's table and play with the Stark children. And if my father rebelled again, Lord Eddard Stark would take his sword and cut off my head. It would be his duty.
Though Robert had risked all our lives to win it, the Iron Throne bored him. He cared little for justice, and less for rule. If it weren't women or wineskin, he had no use for it. Without the stalwart John Arryn as Hand of the King, the challenge to Robert's crown would have come much earlier than it did. The Iron Islands have never lacked for treachery. They respect only strength, and honor is as foreign to them as the Seven. After 6 years, their ruler, Lord Balon Greyjoy, wagered that King Robert had not won the support of the great houses of Westeros, many of whom still named him usurper. Lord Balon declared the Iron Islands independent and sent his Iron Fleet to Lannisport. Lord Tywin Lannister was careless, and the Ironborn caught and burnt his ships at anchor. Lord Balon and his reavers controlled the Sunset Sea. Robert then ordered me to succeed where his father-in-law, Lord Tywin, had failed. Beneath Robert's fury, I sensed relief. War he could understand. He would smash Lord Balon as he had Rhaegar. I raised Robert's fleet and sailed around Westeros to the Iron Islands. I set a trap for the Iron Fleet off Fair Isle. As sailors and warriors, the Ironborn are unparalleled. But they're not soldiers. They have no discipline, no strategy, no unity. In a battle, each man fights only for his own glory, and their longships are built for lightning strikes and shore raids. When the captains rushed in, I smashed their longships with our larger war galleys. The strength of the Ironborn is in their ships. With the Iron Fleet broken, I had assured Robert's victory. He could now transport troops and siege weapons to invade the Iron Islands. And contrary to Balon's hopes, Robert had plenty of both. I've never seen such allegiance as Robert could inspire in war. Enemies who tried to kill him one day would be drinking with him the next under their own fallen banners. In rebelling against the Iron Throne, Lord Balon did more than Robert ever could to cement his rule. When Robert came to the Iron Islands, he brought with him the full power of Westeros. Sir Barristan Selmy of the King's Guard led the assault on Old Wick, while I subdued Great Wick, the largest of the Iron Islands. But Robert saved the seat of House Greyjoy, Pike, for himself and Lord Eddard. Robert would later boast of the battle's bloodiness and how he could have torn down the island into the waves if Lord Balon hadn't bent the knee. But if I'd have led the assault, Balon's neck would have bent, under his sword. because I do not forget. I do not pardon. His time will come. All their times will come.
It's his
My
brother.
brother Robert Baratheon had raised the banners of Storm's End, our ancestral castle, against the mad King Aerys. Jon Arryn of the Vale and Eddard Stark of the North stood with him, and Hoster Tully of the Riverlands would join. But their lands were far from ours, and separated by the combined strength of the West, the Reach, and King's Landing itself. Even Robert's own lords were against him. It was the hardest choice I've ever made. My brother or my king. Blood or honor. Aerys ruled by right of all the laws in Westeros. Everyone knew the price of defiance, but there are deeper, older laws. The younger brother bows before the elder. I followed Robert. Early in the war, Mace Tyrell's indecisive victory at Ashford cut Robert off from Storm's End. Instead of pursuing Robert and risking his record, Mace Tyrell turned east and laid siege to our home. His vast army and navy encircled us and prevented any resupply by land or sea. If a wagon tried to reach us, it was burnt. If a ship tried to land, it was sunk. We were locked in Storm's End to starve, but Robert commanded me to hold the castle no matter the cost. He could ill afford to lose his ancient seat, which had never fallen. While Robert smashed Rhaegar on the Trident, my men ate the dogs, because their horses had already been devoured. While the Lannisters sacked King's Landing,
Yes.
we ate the rats. If the smuggler Davos had not slipped through the Tyrell blockade with his onions, we'd have eaten our own dead. But I held the castle until Lord Eddard remembered us and marched to lift the siege. The Tyrells didn't even put up a fight. And Robert threw a feast to celebrate Lord Eddard's victory. I was sent to the Royal Island stronghold of Dragonstone to deal with Viserys and Daenerys, the last surviving Targaryen children. Before I arrived, however, they escaped across the narrow sea. Robert was furious. He stripped me of Storm's End and gave it to that prancing fool Renly, my younger brother. I could keep Dragonstone. Now Robert is dead, and a bastard pretender soils my throne while the realm fills with schemers and traitors.
So now it makes
But the rightful king is coming for them all, and I will not stop until I have scoured this land clean of abomination. The Baratheons say, ours is the fury. I will show them. Fury burns.
See, his hatred makes way more sense now. Like, I got that he didn't like being leapfrogged, but this
Landing,
gives you more context to the whole thing.
And aren't careful, you may find yourself in Flea Bottom. In such a cesspool did House Seaworth have its glorious start. I got out as soon as I could, finding work on a smuggler's ship. Soon, every port on the narrow sea had a bounty on me, which they would collect if I didn't pay a percentage to the right people or pick the right tides. You know how to tell a good smuggler? When you talk to one, there's a head that talks back. I was very good. Davos of Flea Bottom had run with orphans and beggars, but Davos the smuggler was received by merchants and lords when nobody would catch them. Oddly, the only honest work came from pirates like the notorious, bloodthirsty Salador Sam, an old friend. All he ever wanted was someone to buy his cargo quickly before the tide left, and sell it without telling where I got it. In time, I saved enough to buy a small plot of land and found a woman who was kind enough to overlook my trade. She gave me a son, Mathos. And we dreamt of the traders circled around the Jade Sea, just one trip and I could settle us and our family for life. Then some Storm Lord revolted against the Iron Throne. Wars are not as good for smugglers as you'd think. Every harbour fills with guards and inspectors, and the seas fill with blockades and pirates paid by each side to prey on the other. Though I had no love for the Mad King, I'd grown up around the power of King's Landing. I figured this Robert Baratheon would end the same as the other rebel lords, burnt to ash. But he didn't. The North, the Riverlands and the Vale joined him. And then the taverns people drank to Robert's health openly. Brave fools, I thought. But I had a family who'd be left in the cold if I lost my head. When Mace Tyrell marched on Robert's home of Storm's End, I spied the end of the rebellion. The castle was garrisoned by Robert's younger brother Stannis and a small guard, and would not hold out for long. When it fell, Robert would be homeless, and his support would bleed away. This I knew from experience. Months later, Stannis was still holding the castle. Nobody cared. But on voyages, I had seen what famine does, and I thought of all those men in Storm's End who would die unmourned and forgotten. No better than flea-bottom orphans. I told my wife and myself that I'd get a high price for the onions and salt beef. In truth, I knew I'd be captured by the Tyrell galleys or drowned, but I was too stubborn. Later that night, in the dark, in a tiny boat with a black sail, I cursed myself and the moonlight as I waited for the tide to turn. When it did, the wind beat the sail so hard I ripped it down, fearing the Tyrell ships would hear. Luckily, they'd grown lax. With muffled oars alone, I steered my cargo through the treacherous currents and snarls of rock that gave Shipbreaker Bay its name. The waves finally carried me, soaked and near blind from sea water, through the mouth of the cavern beneath the castle.
Jeez.
Then, Stannis Baratheon arrived. The siege had left him gaunt, but not weak, never weak. He greeted me and accepted my onions with cool courtesy, betraying no emotion, even as all wept. He doled out the food to his wife
Difficult.
and each of his men before he ate himself, a portion no larger than any other. When he finally thanked me, I could see his mind had already returned to the castle's defense. His duty. After Aerys fell and Lord Stark lifted the siege,
Crazy.
Stannis summoned me. For my salvation at Storm's End, I was to be granted a knighthood, a keep of my own, and my son taken into Stannis' personal service. Davos of Flea Bottom had become Sir Davos of House Seaworth, and his son would serve the king's own brother.
Onion
But
knife.
for my previous crimes as a smuggler, I was to have the fingertips of one hand taken off above the highest joint. Stannis held that I had flouted the laws of the land for years, and a good act does not wash out the bad. In one fell swoop, or 5, Stannis gave my son a future and my family a name that I could never have imagined, nor
Still.
earned on my own. I still keep the finger bones in a bag around my neck to remind me what I was and what I owed to Stannis. For during my many years as a smuggler, I visited many ports, taverns and back alleys, and saw many things in this world, but never justice. Until Stannis.
Wow, man.
Some great houses call us
Wow.
upstarts. But the truth is that while the Starks and Lannisters fell to the Targaryens in defeat, House Tyrell rose. For thousands of years, our family served as loyal stewards to the kings of the Reach, until the last of their line unwisely burned to death, resisting the Targaryen invaders. To save the Reach from a similar fate, we yielded the castle of Highgarden to Aegon and his sisters. In gratitude, the Targaryens gave House Tyrell dominion over the Reach, and we became lords of the castle in which, for generations, we had served.
Pussies.
Under the Targaryen dynasty, Westeros prospered. Gone were the petty wars of 7 kingdoms and the endless thirst for minor glories that drove them. The Westerlands enriched the realm. The North guarded it. And the Reach and Riverlands fed it.
Okay, take that back.
This harmony is what Robert Baratheon shattered with his rebellion against Aerys Targaryen. When the call to arms came, though, we did not want to answer. The Reach is a gentle land, and honestly, the Mad King was not much loved. But we owed peace and status to his family. My father, Mace Tyrell, called his banners and marched north to battle the rogue Stormlord Robert, who had already defeated 3 forces in a single day. And, at Ashford, my father won. Some chastened my father for not pursuing Robert after the battle. We had cut him off from the Stormlands, the seat of his power, and he had fled north, within easy grasp of Lord Tywin Lannister, the Hand of Aerys, for 20 years. My father moved instead to lay siege to Robert's ancestral stronghold of Storm's End. The rose would strangle the stag as the lion pounced. So we waited. But the lion slumbered, and Robert slipped past the king's forces to join Ned Stark. We could have lifted the siege and deployed our armies north to aid the crown. We could have stormed the walls of the castle and made Robert homeless. But we had ample supplies, control of land and sea, and most of all, patience. Our siege would succeed.
Complacent.
Eventually, at little cost of life to us. If Robert prolonged the war with minor victories, our capture of Storm's End would hasten his downfall. And if Robert won the war, well, it would not do for him to find us in his halls with the bodies of his brother Stannis and his sworn men. When the lion finally showed his colours and purged King's Landing, we knew our cause was lost. My father chose the peaceful route and bent the knee to Robert, who heartily pardoned us.
Wow.
Strange, considering how we'd beaten him and starved his brother to the brink of death. We were to keep our lands, castle and title, but we knew that we would never be welcome at court. It didn't matter. The Reach was still the most fertile of the 7 kingdoms, and under our hand. Every flower, even the rose, needs pruning. Then it grows strong.
Maybe they just weren't ruthless enough, 'cause as we know now, they're done now, innit? They're gone.
Family, duty, honor.
Except for the old one.
Every Tully child learns our words.
She's still alive.
But I was a woman before I understood them. Years before, my father had taken to foster the son of a wartime friend, a minor lord on the Fingers. The boy had arrived at our castle as Peter Baelish. Due to his home and size, my brother soon named him Littlefinger. When I came of age, Brandon Stark of Winterfell sought and won my hand. To my father, Brandon was heir to the north and a suitable match for a daughter of House Tully. To me, Brandon was wild and terrifying, never far from laughter or trouble. I loved him with all the fire of a first passion, much I came to realize as Peter loved me.
Yeah.
When Peter heard of my engagement, he challenged Brandon to a duel. Peter survived only because I begged Brandon not to kill him. I still thought of Peter as family.
Laughing. Oh.
Now, I wish I had let him die.
God.
Only days before my wedding, when I thought to be happy forever, Prince Rhaegar Targaryen abducted Brandon's sister, Lyanna. Hot-blooded as always, Brandon immediately rode for King's Landing to demand justice, which the Mad King Aerys Targaryen gave him, in his own twisted fashion. The day the Raven arrived with the news of my Brandon's death, I locked myself in a room and refused to eat for days, until my father reminded me of my duty. I was to marry Eddard, Brandon's younger brother, a man whom I had never met, though of whom none spoke ill, or spoke anything at all. Our union would cement an alliance of the North, Vale, Stormlands and Riverlands in rebellion against the Mad King.
Weird, I knew all this, but
I was a Tully.
seeing
I did
it
my duty.
in
We were
context,
married
everything.
quickly, and were spared only one night before he had to return to the field. I spent the war by the windows waiting for a raven to hear if my son would grow up fatherless or at all. We knew the price of defeat. I scoured the kitchens and washing rooms for any and all gossip. Robert had won. and crushed the Mad King. Robert had lost, but Jaime Lannister was now king. Robert had almost won, but the Mad King had become a dragon and burned King's Landing to ash. At night, I told myself the war would end soon and bring peace. Either a victory or the grave. I was wrong. Robert won, and my husband avenged his brother and my love. But when he came home to me, he could not meet my eyes. I saw the reason by his side.
Not quite.
Many men have bastards, I know.
Not quite.
And under the strain of war, any man, no matter how honourable, may forsake his vows for a night of warmth that he may never know again. But Ned Stark was not built like other men. His northern honour would not let him sequester his shame in some distant holdfast. He brought this boy, this Jon Snow, home to raise with his true-born children. My children. Yet even these bitter memories are sweet now. They are all I have left of my Ned. Our family is broken and scattered, and our son must wage a war for the pieces. We need to go home. The Starks are of the north, and, like the snows of winter when they come south, they melt away.
I always hated her constant hatred of Jon, man. It's like...
House Tyrell trace our descent to Garth Greenhand,
Get
the
over it.
legendary first king of the Reach who made the land bloom. But so too does every noble house around us. It seems dear ancestor Garth planted as many flowers as he plucked. A king should have more consideration for his line, don't you think? For over 1,000 years, the Greenhand sons and grandsons ruled the Reach as House Gardener. The offshoots of his daughters grew into vast and powerful houses in their own right, except for House Tyrell. We chose instead to serve our Gardener cousins faithfully as stewards, to manage their stronghold of Highgarden and the daily affairs of the Reach. Our words are growing strong. And under our stewardship, the Reach did just that. As did we. Until a blundering king almost cost us everything. Aegon Targaryen had landed in Westeros. King Mern allied us with the Roth to repel the upstart's army. One can only marvel that King Mern did not reconsider when he saw the living dragons against him.
Yeah.
Perhaps he should have sought counsel from his trusted stewards before he set out. Then again, perhaps he did. At the Field of Fire, Aegon, and let us not forget, his sisters, burnt the combined armies of the Reach and Rock. King Mern paid for his misjudgment with his life and that of his ancient family. In a day, the Reach had lost its king, its ruling house, and most of its army. Thankfully for everyone, my ancestor, Harlan Tyrell, had better sense. Until the Maesters sorted out the intel among Mern's cousins, Harlan the Steward was acting Lord of Highgarden. To ensure peace and life in the Reach, he would yield the castle to Aegon. The other castles and families would then follow, as they had since the Dawn Age. Aegon had a continent to conquer, and the fertile Reach was too valuable to raise. He accepted Harlan's proposal and welcomed our lands into his kingdom. To show his gratitude, Aegon entitled Harlan to Highgarden, the castle his family had served for 1,000 years.
Tyrells are probably the
and
smartest out of
House
everybody.
Tyrell his wardens of the south, choosing us over older, greater families in the Reach.
Except for the Night of Flowers,
Our
he fucked
house
up.
thus owed everything to the Targaryens. So is it any wonder we stayed true to King Aerys, even during his madness, and even after Robert Baratheon rebelled? Some may question my father for laying siege to the Baratheons' home, instead of marching to aid Prince Rhaegar before Robert could kill him and scatter the royal army. But let us not forget that we had already dealt Robert his only defeat of the war at Ashford. If Lord Tywin Lannister had not vanquished the Mad King so suddenly, our siege would have destroyed Robert's home and his brothers and won the war for Aerys. But when the Targaryens fell, House Tyrell again chose peace and prosperity over war and devastation, and bent the knee to King Robert Baratheon, first of his name. We returned to Highgarden to manage the affairs of the Reach as we had for thousands of years, and will for 1,000 more.
Not quite.
Other great houses take lions and wolves for their sigils, and draw their power from the gold in their mountains or the cold of their winters. But mountains run dry, winter yields to spring, and the rose blooms once more.
Oh, that's a perfect place to stop, man. 30 minutes in, half hour left. Dude, that's what I love about this shit, man. It's like that first half that I watched, pretty much 90% of it I was aware of. I remember from reading the books originally. The first, I read like the first 3. Then halfway to 4, then I just got fed up that everyone was dying. I literally just got so angry. This is before the show was anywhere near that part. I think the show was still like on season 2 at that point, or somewhere about. And yeah, I just got so pissed off. I was like, stop killing everybody, and I just stopped. So my heart was broken. Then I went back to the show. I let the show kind of continue the story for me. And I fell back in love with it. The frustration waned. But yeah, most of this information was stuff I remembered from the books, but at the same time, something about the way that they kind of present it, and it kind of links all the strings together, and it's like, oh yeah, and you kind of get a better sense of the characters now, especially with Stannis and his sort of his anger that he had, and like the honor's still there, and he tried to do what right, but you can still get a sense of that frustration that he had, feeling like, you know, he shouldn't have been, why he went against his brother. A lot of people were like, why is he doing this? Or what if his brother was they leaped from, you know, the position of king to his younger brother. Kind of understand Stannis's not hatred, that's too strong a word, but you know, his anger at his brother being made king over him. And it just kind of makes it make more sense. It makes it seem less like he was just bitter for bitter's sake. You know, he really didn't do anything to deserve that. It's not his fault that, you know, the Targaryens escaped, the children got out of there before he arrived. It's not his fault. Like, how can you punish him for that? But just all these different things, man. Like, what I still don't, the thing which still doesn't really wash for me is why what's the face was still so angry at Ned and resentful at Jon, you know, for being alive. Like, her hatred towards him, like, you can understand it for like a first year maybe or 2, but you know, he was a baby, and by the time he's like a young man, to still hate him, to still look at him with despise, even after you have all of your own children who are all healthy and happy at that point, you kind of needed to get over that shit. But beyond that, yeah, I love it. It had given me a great sense of the Tyrells. That was always a bit, I didn't know that much about them. I don't remember reading about that in the books. So it definitely kind of makes them feel like a more richer lineage. Oh God, part of me still so wishes they started from the beginning. But anyway, man, guys, what did you think? I'm going to continue with this soon. So yeah, if you like the video, please subscribe, give me a thumbs up. I'm Eddie Reese. This has been my first take to Game of Thrones: The Complete Histories Lore Season 2. Yeah, later, guys.